Get ready because we're about to hit you with a lot of information in a very short period of time. Don't be afraid to rewind, replay, or research.
Our extensive research has only uncovered 2 photos where William Alexander Smith's crutch is not conspicuously positioned.
We have learned how to kindle light and cheer and hope out of the ashes and cinders of the lost cause.
Isn't it odd how the same monument was in front of another courthouse?
For well over the first half of the 20th century, there were buildings to the left of the Belk Building, but those were lost to fire in 1983. The Belk Building was built sometime in the late 1860s or early 1870s, and the buildings to the right were also built in the 19th century.
The collection of currency to the left is from the Bank of Wadesboro. It was a substantial institution in the antebellum South, but closed its doors in late 1865, claiming that the bank had overly invested in Confederate currency and had lost all with the war.
Wadesboro of antebellum America was the banking capital that Charlotte is today. In fact, money from Anson County was instrumental in starting the banks in Charlotte and also developed the area to be what it is.
Isn't it odd how the cause is mentioned in both the poem by John Demetri and also the lower inscription reportedly written by Riston Tyler Bennett? We'll provide much more on this man of several noteworthy titles, but none of them legitimately colonel.
Isn't it odd how all 6 tenets of the lost cause myth can be seen within the scenes and inscriptions?
You can see the exaggerated features of the woman standing in the scene. This is intended to represent the Black Mammy, and this scene with the year inscription above it are an odd attempt to portray slavery as beneficial to all involved.
Isn't it odd how all that can be seen of the young girl's face on the left side of the monument in the photograph are her eyes?
But her arm is white.
This photo was included on page 10 of the Charlotte Observer on Sunday, September 23rd, 1934.
This date is highly significant in North Carolina's history. Isn't it odd that the dedication for this monument is on the rear of it? Almost like it was an afterthought. But her arm is white.
You'll see no discharge dates for Eli Freeman or Edmund Fenton. Fenton lost his left arm at Chancellorsville, and Eli Freeman was killed at Bethesda Church.
We'll circle back to the KGC in the future. They are a significant part of America's story that you probably haven't ever heard before. Their first attempt to cause the collapse was thwarted by Lincoln, and Booth had many more planned victims he wasn't able to get to.
World War I Memorial is not Anson County's only memorial commemorating the separate but equal status of Jim Crow segregation.
This is the probate of William Alexander Smith's will. You'll notice that it was a paper writing with no subscribing witnesses.
The will bears the date of June 23rd, 1923. It is claimed to have been found among valuable papers and effects following William Alexander Smith's death on April 16, 1934. It is sworn by Bennett Dunlap Nelm, also known as William Bennett Dunlap, on the 21st of April, 1934, less than 1 week following William Alexander Smith's death.
Lockhart, Bogan, and Marshall certified the handwriting of the will.
In reading correspondence from a collection belonging to William Alexander Smith, we noticed 2 remarkably similar handwritings with one difference.
It appears that Bennett was groomed from an early age to mimic Smith's handwriting exactly. The A in the signature looks like a way they were able to distinguish between which one wrote a particular document.
This is item 10 of the will. It directs the executor to erect a monument on the courthouse lot in Wadesboro, North Carolina, at a cost of $2,000, not more than $3,000. The triptych design symbolizes devotion. It's a common symbol in Christianity and is used often in the design of altars. The tall centerpiece and the 2 shorter side pieces.
The side pieces are slightly angled inward to direct focus to the center focal point.
And what the monument is devoted to.
Isn't it odd how the article states that William Alexander Smith sent a communication stating he would be at the Military Day celebration in May, but also states that he was the recent donor of a monument to the women of the Confederacy. And then the scramble to create a cover story begins.
This article, published just over 1 week following Smith's death, discusses a second monument created by the will.
These 6 articles, all from various papers and all very similar, were published in March, weeks before Smith's death. These 5 articles cover the dedication ceremony on September 22nd, 1934. None of these articles were included on the front page of their publications. The article covering the dedication ceremony in the Anson News is the only one to make it to the front page of its publication. It just so happens that this issue of the Anson News was its first.
Isn't it odd that this monument doesn't appear to be removed?
It is unclear if those completing the profile for the monument were unaware of military drill or if this is an intentional effort to deceive. In military drill, the attention position is unique. It is the only position that you can march from. Someone standing at attention is considered to be ready and awaiting marching orders. This inscription was on the west-facing side when it was in its original location. Today, it is on the north-facing side of the monument. The cornerstone dedication ceremony is covered in the profile for the monument. However, this issue of the local paper covering the cornerstone dedication ceremony is not listed in the source.
There is a reason.
On screen and being read are excerpts from the dedication article not cited.
Our Anglo-Saxon ancestors wrested this land from the savages, built its homes, its cities and towns, its schools and colleges, its churches and asylums. Their descendants did not intend to surrender it to any alien or inferior race.
This excerpt pictured is from the 1906 annual UDC meeting minutes.
That's too many mistakes and omissions to be considered unintentional. This monument's profile shows a $3,000 cost for the monument, but the article covering the dedication ceremony on January 19, 1906 states that it was $2,800, and the minutes from the annual meeting of the United Daughters of the Confederacy in Raleigh shows that they outlaid $2,575 for the monument.
All of these figures appear to be incorrect. We've discovered in William Alexander Smith's personal correspondence a proposal letter to furnish and erect this monument in Wadesboro at a cost of $2,300 by I.W. Durham.
This is the only photo we found of William Alexander Smith, where it appears he is in motion with his second wife, Mrs. Nancy Flake Smith.
Upon closer examination, you can see that Smith is a few feet closer to the camera than everyone else. He is also kneeling taller than the lower sitting position those behind him are in. A hat is blocking view of his right knee that may be on something, and his crutch is holding him at a higher position than someone kneeling naturally.
It is immediately obvious that Smith is not able to place his feet flat on the ground in front of him, and he appears to be seated in a chair quite a bit taller than the one T.J. Watkins is seated.
Why are we telling you this?
Obviously, Smith used various gimmicks to make himself appear larger than he actually was. It is also mentioned in various writings from others that Smith was small and weak. These details, more accurately describing the physical stature of William Alexander Smith, provide insight into the events occurring on July 1, 1862, or the Battle of Malvern Hill.
Those not familiar with common tactics of warfare used during this period may not understand how a person's height or comments regarding their physical strength can be used to disprove untruthful claims by someone stealing valor from others who were more courageous than them.
Basically, Smith would not have been part of the color guard. This false detail about his service in the Confederate Army raises serious questions about whether or not he was wounded at the Battle of Malvern Hill.
This clipping is the casualty report for the Battle of Malvern Hill, published later in the week following the battle in the North Carolina Argus. Smith is listed as being wounded below the knee, and that the bone was not hurt. If the bone had been hit, then he would have lost his leg. The report also says that Smith's father and other Ansonians, likely other planners, were in Richmond.
The timing of this trip to Richmond by Smith's father is peculiar considering the false narrative and unique discharge William Alexander Smith received, and knowing that William Alexander Smith's older brother had apparently deserted after first seeing the enemy forces in Yorktown at the beginning of the Peninsula Campaign.
Smith's oldest brother appears to not have served at all.
The reason we've touched on the building conditions on this corner is because of the dedication ceremony held on September 22, 1934. The ceremony was reported to have 2,000 in attendance. That seems hard to believe since the major difference in this with this side from 1934 to today is that a stoplight has been added at the intersection. There were actually more buildings and less space in this area back in 1934. The single photo of the ceremony only pictures 16 people. 2 of those were the entertainment. The widow of William Alexander Smith is pictured. General McCloskey is in there, Smith's sister is included, and the 2 uniformed men are likely part of the ceremony with one bearing the American flag. 7 of the 16 pictured were essentially part of the ceremony.
The woman with the small child to the left, and those standing behind her appear as though they are waiting in line. These 4 seem intently focused on the young girl's face. A crowd of 2,000 is very unlikely, and this photo appears staged.
This photo of a people fest at the intersection of Green and Wade Streets, just up the hill from the monument's location, includes less than 300 people.
Well over 6 times the amount of people in that People Fest photo at the monument's dedication ceremony.
Is hard to believe.
United States Army General Manus McCloskey looks to be the target of the staged photo as part of an assault on his professional reputation.
General McCloskey was born and raised in Pittsburgh. He attended West Point where he excelled at the top of his class. McCloskey was a veteran of World War I and received 2 Silver Stars, a Purple Heart, and the Army Distinguished Service Medal for his actions during the war.
General McCloskey was a commanding officer of Fort Bragg at the time of the dedication ceremony. He also happened to be President Roosevelt's point person for the Works Progress Administration in North Carolina, and he was even more of an overachiever by managing the operations of the Civil Conservation Corps in the state. The Civil Conservation Corps provided stable employment for young men during the Great Depression. In Anson County, the majority of those young men he kept employed with conservation projects, due to the inherent racial demographics of the area, were black.
The man in uniform to the left holding the flag has more than likely just removed the flag from its position on the right side of the monument. This replacement of the flag and the monument's flag holder was more than likely done to capture this picture and for the assault on General McCloskey's professional reputation. Let's talk about some racism.
These men embraced the principles of their leaders.
They believed our social institutions and our right of local self-government.
This inscription makes a proclamation to all who see it, taking its original location, current position, and its current existence into account. It was intended for the message to be delivered to as many in the county as possible. The original westward-facing direction of this inscription would have it facing the Wadesboro town square at the intersection of Wade and Green Streets. In fact, the entire monument was originally proposed to be erected in the middle of this intersection. This plan was only vetoed because of space constraints and essentially the full obstruction of the intersection.
This inscription, like the lower one on the Women of the Confederacy monument, was reportedly penned by Brisden Tyler Bennett.
In front of the courthouse was, in reality, the second best location for it to be noticed by all in the county. It seems they realized what it projected when positioned in front of the building of law.
As for the actual cost of the monument, specific aspects of the monument itself may shed light on the party responsible for it. I.W. Durham's proposal letter detailing the dimensions, type of material or variety, and even some construction methods can be used to make this determination. The sentence prior to the cost proposal sentence states, all joints to be painted with lead. Viewing the monument today, you will notice a metallic substance in all of the seams between granite pieces. This metallic substance can also be scratched with a fingernail, and we can easily see that it isn't gold.
This would likely mean that the monument was moved with the pedestal fully intact, without any of the granite being separated. A reliable source with knowledge of the statue's removal in 2020 stated the statue was relatively lightweight because it is hollow. We haven't been able to verify its magnetic properties or possible foundry mark, but its original appearance resembling white bronze and hollowness indicate it was cast by Monumental Bronze Company of Bridgeport, Connecticut.
This seam sealant method is unique to only this monument in Anson.
I.W. Durham was known to primarily source his monuments out of the Philadelphia subsidiary of Monumental Bronze Company. The monument was apparently refurbished sometime around 2013, and the statue appears to have been rebronzed.
The statue being rebronzed puts into question the foundry mark and whether or not it would be visible. Since the statue's removal in 2020, it has been in the possession of a private benefactor in personal storage.
This newspaper announcement of the company, listed in the profile as the provider, seems suspicious, with the proprietor of seemingly their local competition acting as the manager of this new company.
This company and Scoggins Memorial Art show signs of potentially being fronts for money laundering. Bronzing in 2013 would have been its first, since white bronze is the trade name for zinc. Let's go ahead and talk about some more racism. This next monument was apparently rushed. It has a confusing inscription referencing World War. As with the World War I memorial on the front of the courthouse, this is another of Anson County's monuments commemorating the separate but equal status of Jim Crow laws. Please take notice of equality underlined in the inscription on this originally segregated water fountain. These next three banks were mentioned in the will as being able to hold the funds created by
Most will recognize Wachovia of Winston-Salem and their evolution into Wells Fargo today, but the other two may not be as recognizable.
This is because American Trust Company of Charlotte, through a series of mergers and acquisitions, has been known as Bank of America since 1999.
The First National Bank of Wadesboro, in its lengthy list of acquisitions and mergers, has been known by several very familiar names. Branch Banking and Trust, or BB&T, one. SunTrust is another, and today it is known as Truist. Will it be equal to victory, superior to defeat?
Don't let it.
You've seen quite a bit on the Lost Cause. Do you know what the Lost Cause of the Confederacy is? The Lost Cause myth is just a method used to achieve the Lost Cause of the Confederacy. The sounds of those fireworks replaced what was originally going to end this video at this point as the original plan. However, we realized we haven't told you enough for you to understand the contemporary relevance and importance of what we're explaining. Anson County Courthouse, where Andrew Jackson first obtained his license to practice law. The Anson County Courthouse, where in 1768 the Anson regulators took over the courthouse and were the first in the country to utter the concept of taxation without representation. The Anson County Courthouse, where Judge Samuel Spencer practiced law. This links Anson County to the creation and first use of the concept of judicial review. 47 of North Carolina's 100 counties were once within Anson County. The land areas of the cities of Chattanooga and Memphis were once a part of Anson County. Rowan County was the first to be carved out of Anson, then Mecklenburg, then Montgomery, then Richmond, and lastly, it was Union County in 1842.
The funds created by William Alexander Smith's will have contributed to education and the physical well-being of both sexes. However, the will directed these funds to be used for the betterment of only the white race.
While channeling the spirit of William Alexander Smith in this will, it was not written by him. It was written posthumously by his adopted son, originally known as William Bennett Dunlap, then after his 21st birthday, Bennett Dunlap Nelm. Smith lacked the education and awareness of the complex concepts included in the will. The numerous pieces of supporting evidence have told us this, but there is also a clear, undeniable indication within the will itself. During the time that Smith attended Davidson College, it was nothing more than a finishing school for landed gentry.
Would you have realized the veteran being announced was not CSS?
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian-Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
This introduction was highly deceptive, and it was intended as an attempt to possibly legitimize part of the Russian psychological operation. This aspect of the multifaceted PSYOP is that there is a neo-Nazi movement at the forefront of the Ukrainian government whose president is a Jewish man. The objectives of Vladimir Putin and those of the KGC coalesce somewhere in the past century, more than likely in the 1920s with the spread of the true invisible empire. Many of the same methods of deception are used in the Russian PSYOP. Things like dog whistles, and near constant gaslighting, the alignment with religion, and the targeting of those who are more likely to take a leap of faith, projection of negative characteristics onto others, and the one that we've all become very familiar with, saying something until it becomes the truth.
Now tell me, does this viral clip surprise you?
The methods of deception used by Smith and other members of the KGC can be seen in use today. You've already seen several examples in this video, and we plan to show you several more in order for you to fully understand and recognize the deception. If you haven't yet seen it, our video It's a Duck covers the dog whistles apparent with Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
We don't have time for it in this video. We will get into how Anson County is deeply rooted in the ideology of white supremacy and the spread of the Ku Klux Klan that became the true invisible empire.
Frankly, it means when there's looting, people get shot and they
Those
die.
who think the Lost Cause of the Confederacy is a fictional retelling of U.S. history, the myth is only a long-term way of eventually achieving the Lost Cause of the Confederacy. The ultimate objective is the Golden Circle, a slave state where white supremacy is the social order. In order to form the Golden Circle, the collapse of our constitutional republic must occur. This will create the opportunity for what will be portrayed as a great philanthropic effort. KGC's original plan to cause the collapse was the secession movement. With this, they thought removing the southern revenues and the northern states mounting military effort to reclaim their stolen sovereign territory, this military effort would be portrayed as an invasion, would cause the collapse of the United States of America. President Lincoln held us together, but many would believe the war never ended. This is when their next attempt to cause the collapse came into play. John Wilkes Booth was either a sympathizer or a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle. It said the Vice President, Secretary of Treasury, and the Secretary of War were all planned victims of his that night at Ford's Theater. If he hadn't broken his leg jumping from a balcony, he may have pulled it off. How soon following the surrender at Appomattox do you think Lincoln's assassination occurred? Did you know that Lincoln was assassinated less than 1 week following the end of the Civil War? In an upcoming video, we'll cover September 23, 1934, and the Great Textile Strike of 1934 that began on Labor Day that year in North Carolina when 60,000 textile workers walked off the job on strike. And what a photo of the dedication ceremony taken the day before the strike ended can tell us about history. A strike where the North Carolina governor mobilized the National Guard. The National Guard constructed internment camps. Union leaders were kidnapped and held at these internment camps, and arrested strikers were also held to speed the end of the strike and the return to work. We'll discuss reasons why the entertainment for the dedication ceremony would have been in blackface. We'll also help you to begin the realization of the Civil War being about much more than just slavery, freedom, and equality. It provided the possibility of a bright future for almost every single American. The Civil War was our country's first nationwide battle in the fight for workers' rights.
This single photograph provides a relative gauge to estimate Smith's true height from. Mrs. Nancy Flake Smith appears to be about 4'8" from the photo of the dedication ceremony. Smith, while walking with her, appears to possibly be just a couple of inches taller than her. His height was about 5 feet tall or under.
I once attempted to assist my great uncle, who used a cane, through a doorway. I ignorantly grabbed the arm holding the cane to assist him. I've never made this mistake again. Take notice of which arm Mrs. Smith is holding. Let's cover a little bit about the former Congressman Risden Tyler Bennett in this video. The first thing to catch my attention in this photo is how Risden Tyler Bennett's feet are positioned in the stirrups. Then I thought about how June 1st isn't trenchcoat weather in the Piedmont of North Carolina. It appears that Midnight's hindquarters were smaller than the front. This allowed Bennett to stand in the stirrups without it being as noticeable and under the concealment of the trenchcoat. We are currently working on an episode concentrating on Risden Tyler Bennett. As you can see, he owned a large portion of Wadesboro and had many notable accomplishments during his life. William Alexander Smith can only be described as a pathological liar. Almost every part of his life was fabricated. Most of what anyone knows about his life is false. One simple way of recognizing the deceptions of William Alexander Smith is to look at what he wants you to look at. If he wants you to take notice of something, know that that is probably a lie. Bennett was elected Solicitor of Anson County. He was a North Carolina judge, a North Carolina Superior Court judge, North Carolina State Representative, and he was North Carolina's only U.S. Congressman to ever be elected by a statewide vote in an at-large election. But he was never a colonel in the Confederate Army. The first mention we found of Bennett being promoted to colonel was found in the book credited to Smith on the Anson Guards. It's said to have occurred 4 days following the Battle of Malvern Hill, on July 5th, 1862. Just like Smith was never in the color guard, but he did wear his Confederate uniform every day following the war. Say it until it's true. It looks like Bennett picked up a trick from Smith. This is a list of all of the newspapers that newspapers.com tracks as being operational in Anson County throughout its history. This list does not include the Anson News. Much more on the Anson News in the future. As we mentioned earlier, Wadesboro Marble and Granite Finishing Company and Scoggins Memorial Art look to be fronts for money laundering. There is a long history of money laundering in Anson County. The locations General Sherman's army paid special attention to on their march from Savannah to Goldsboro may be an indication of what some of the 19th century money laundering was covering up. The Argus casualty report from the Battle of Malvern Hill shown earlier may provide insight into the troop presence of Company Charlie of the 14th North Carolina Volunteers, or the Anson Guards, for this consequential battle. In the book credited to Smith on the Anson Guards, it is stated that the Anson Guards served as the regimental colors for the charge up Malvern Hill. This is odd because the number of casualties the company sustained was disproportional from the other companies involved in the battle. This is very odd considering their company would have been where most of the enemy fire would be directed as regimental colors. They would be leading the charge, and all surviving the artillery volleys would regroup at the colors to concentrate the attack. This could be an indication that some of the Anson Guards were not present for the battle. No Confederate advances made it anywhere near the U.S. Army artillery positions that mowed down Confederate soldiers who made the march across the barren uphill ascent. The only place to take cover from the artillery was at the very bottom of the hill. Skirmishers were sent to dispatch those taking refuge in that only cover. This regrouping, or rallying around the colors, was a tactic of warfare that had been unchanged since the Greeks, Romans, and even the Vikings. During the period of the Civil War, any able-bodied man was able to fire and reload a musket. However, it took the tallest and the strongest to hold the flag above all others as the only means of communications. This is why being part of the color guard was such an honored position. It meant you were the tallest and the strongest of your unit. The intent of this concentrated attack was the same as the Greeks, Romans, and Vikings had intended with their attacks. If the advancing attacks were able to break through the enemy's lines, the enemy may see chaos where there should be order, and it was a demoralizing factor that often made them turn and run. As I'm sure most of us have heard, knowing our history will help us to prevent making the same mistakes once again. But knowing that history also aids in knowing if someone has tried to accomplish something multiple times in the past. If so, it is likely they may try it again. Prior to the 13th Amendment and its prohibition on slavery, under most circumstances, there was no real value placed on labor. It was the cost of a slave and their upkeep offset by the value the slave contributed. For the Southern commoner, it was a constant struggle to pay just the taxes on what they'd come into possessing. There were no jobs they could go out and get to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. All labor was from slaves and incurred no additional costs. Any potential employment was undercut by free labor. The northern states had seen increase in manufacturing to employ Americans, and there were commitments by all northern states to abolish slavery. Employed labor with compensation for an employee's labor was much more progressed than the northern states. Compensation for labor was a concept adamantly resisted by the planters of the Old South. In fact, they decided to start a war to keep their free labor. This is the claimed heritage that those flying the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia say they're honoring. This heritage is actually tyrannical rule by the few wealthy elites. The Civil War was about much more than just freedom and equality. Once again, it was our country's first nationwide battle in the fight for workers' rights. Before this, there were none. This ties directly into that significant date in North Carolina's history mentioned earlier of September 23, 1934. This date was the end of another nationwide battle in the fight for workers' rights. The KGC have tried multiple times in our history to cause the collapse of our constitutional republic. This must happen in order for them to form the Golden Circle. It can't be taken by force and must fall on its own, and there must also be the perception of the democratic will that is to blame for the collapse. Otherwise, the Confederate soldiers would have marched through D.C. after the First Battle of Bull Run. We've once again just celebrated the first step of our nation's founders towards this great experiment in freedom and democracy. We are the oldest, and all others have looked to us in creating their own experiments on this earth. We have long been the beacon of freedom for those persecuted, oppressed, or endangered around the world seeking a better life where the government is restrained by law from depriving the natural rights of others. As Americans, we believe that we are provided the opportunities of life, liberty, and the pursuit of our own reasonable happiness based on the codified protections for every person within the boundaries of this country under the Constitution. This is the reason that those yearning for the lost cause of the Confederacy despise our founding document that postulates our exceptionalism and greatness. Without this empowering framework, the United States of America, or the land area we understand as this union of states and territories, would be a nihilistic oblivion. Our Constitution has provided us with almost an inability to see how things may be without it. We can't allow the normalcy bias to cause complacency. This Republican principle of strict adherence to written law is the only reason for envy from those around the world. This program to the 1921 annual reunion of the United Confederate Veterans provides insight into the mentalities and the sentiments held by the veterans and other Americans who attended these reunions. You can see their insistence that General Lee never laid down his sword, as well as the praise for Nathan Bedford Forrest, the original leader of the Ku Klux Klan. This was also the reunion where William Alexander Smith was made the head of North Carolina Confederate Veterans, and the year that Julian Shakespeare Carr became the head of the United Confederate Veterans Organization. In a future episode, you'll learn about March 14th, 1922, and going right along with that date, you'll learn about May 31st, 1927. You'll also see additional evidence, either supporting or proving the claims we've made in this video. You'll hear some more cringeworthy stories and learn that some of the people of our past were not as they publicly portrayed. This page, detailing the contents of the personal collection of William Alexander Smith, has provided insight for us into a more accurate history. As for the current state of Anson County, today there is a racial divide in the county due to political influences on the national level and locally. Specifically, the county's unelected sheriff, successor of Landrick Reed, who passed away just before the last election. The county's racial divide has metastasized until it is a powder keg just waiting to ignite. This racial divide on a rural county level is emblematic of the race relations throughout the country, especially due to our current president, our co-president, and other key figures in the administration and also outside of the administration that seem to foment racism. We are not Democrats, we are not Republicans, we are not independents, we are Americans. Out of many, we are all one. This is a war of the minds. Do not blindly follow, even those you trust. They could very likely be leading you off a cliff. The final few lines detailing this collection gives a clear indication that not everything is as it seems. We have a lot to tell you. From 1926 until his death in 1934, the legal guardians of William Alexander Smith were Mary Bennett Smith and Bennett Dunlap Nelm. The odd part about this is that Mary Bennett Smith died in 1914. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you learned something, you should hit it too. That should be about everyone, considering this was either a change to what you know or completely new. Many of the sources and much of the documentation used and sometimes discovered by our investigation are posted on areadispatch.com. If it isn't yet posted, it will be in the future. We are working on it. Subscribe to the channel and stay updated with our future releases. There will be more. This is just one more excerpt detailing the contents of the collection belonging to William Alexander Smith. In this piece, you can see how truly pervasive Smith's activities, assisted by his adopted son, were to American life. You can see the controversy over the content of history textbooks for state public schools. I'll give you 3 guesses of what that's about. You can see the correspondence on the Democratic primary of 1912, which was the year that saw Woodrow Wilson elected president. Wilson attended 1 year at Davidson College prior to transferring to Princeton. In 1915, Woodrow Wilson held a private screening in the White House of The Birth of a Nation, which fueled the second rise of the Invisible Empire. Wilson was also responsible for segregation at the federal level. Well, this video is twice the length that it was originally planned to be, but you now know the importance and the relevance of the story we have to tell. Thank you for sticking it out until the end.